Hello, and welcome to the Dance Physio Podcast, a podcast designed to explore ideas and foster discussion around dancer health and wellness. We're here to challenge the status quo, bridge the gap between dance science and the studio, and help change the landscape of the dance industry for the better. I'm your host, Erica Mayall, a dancer turned physiotherapist who is deeply passionate about leaving the dance world better than I found it. I'm so glad you're here. Let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Dance Physio Podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I'm your host, Erica Mayall, and today I have a really great podcast episode for you. I have a guest on, and these are always super fun episodes. So today I have Chloey Turner on, and Chloey Turner is a former principal lead dancer with Riverdance, touring the world for 12 years before transitioning into a career dedicated to fitness, wellness, and mental health advocacy. Originally from England, which you'll hear from her accent, and now based in the US, she co-founded the weighted activewear brand KiloGear CUT and is a certified personal trainer with over 500 hours of yoga and mindfulness education, along with 2 decades of experience in the fitness and wellness industry. Fueled by her passion for dancer well-being, Chloey founded the From Head to Toe Academy, the first holistic wellness platform specifically designed for the Irish dance community. Through this initiative, she collaborates with experts in mobility, strength training, nutrition, and performance psychology to support dancers both on and off the stage. Most recently, she launched Elevate Irish Dance Strength and Conditioning, which is a live training program crafted to help dancers build strength, power, and resilience for long-term success. Beyond her contributions to dance and fitness, Chloey is a dedicated advocate for mental health and well-being, delivering impactful workshops and talks worldwide. Her philosophy is simple yet profound. Take care of the human being and the dancer will thrive. And I love that so much. So welcome to the podcast, Chloey. Thank you so much for being here.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the work that you do.
Yeah, you're most welcome. So Chloey and I first connected through social media. So one of the lovely benefits of the social media world. We connected through that and then have gotten to know each other a little bit more with, she was a participant in one of the previous rounds of the Flexibility Foundations course. We'll chat a bit more about that later maybe. But I don't know your background super well. So I always love to start back at the beginning. And I'm wondering if you could just tell me a little bit about like how you first got involved in dance or what your earliest memories of dance are.
Yeah, absolutely. I was around 7 years old. I think I started actually with modern dance classes because a few of my friends were going from school and it seemed like a fun thing to do. And my earliest memory of being on the stage was being the crab Sebastian from The Little Mermaid and singing Under the Sea. Yeah, I even remember a little bit of the choreography. But everything changed, to be honest, when my family and I watched the Eurovision Song Contest. That year, Riverdance was the 7-minute interval act, back when it was just a 7-minute interval. And like so many people, I guess, around the world, I was blown away. And I knew immediately then that I wanted to do Irish dancing. It was all I could talk about for a while. And a few months later, I started taking local Irish dance classes. I don't think initially the young woman teaching us was even a qualified instructor. I think she was about 17. But, you know what, I loved it. And eventually, I say a year or so after, a certified teacher took over, and that's when things got a little bit more serious and we had to travel further for lessons, which meant obviously a bigger commitment from the family. But I still remember my first class with this school. In fact, my dad drove me, but when I got there, I completely froze in the car. I could hear the taps coming from, it wasn't a big, beautiful studio. It was just a school hall where a lot of us Brits and Irish would have performed in back then or practiced in. We didn't have these lovely, glamorous studios. And I could hear the music and the taps. And I was such a nervous little girl. And I just couldn't bring myself to go inside. So my dad, he was very patient with me. He said, okay, we'll go home then. So, I refused to move. So we drove home, and would you believe it took a couple more attempts? And in the end, my dad was like, okay, we've driven an hour again. I'm going to take you in. He opened up the car door. I'll never forget it. And he took me out of there and he put me in the dance class. I think he felt a bit guilty afterwards, but he knew I wanted to do it. But he had to drag me through the door in the end. But of course I loved it. And there was nothing wrong. I had a beautiful dance class. I got on just fine. I was just very nervous child. And the same thing happened the first time I got on stage to compete in Irish dance. I panicked and I ran off. The music started, I pointed my toe, I ran off the stage. There's a theme here. So it took me a while to settle in. And my poor dad, he had to help me manage my nerves as best as he could throughout my entire competitive career. I was the, snap at my parent kind of nervous child. So the poor man had to have the patience of an absolute saint.
Amazing. I love that story, though, of like the support that you can hear behind that, of him knowing that you really wanted it. It wasn't like forcing you to do something that they had an idea that you wanted to do or anything. It was like you really wanted it, but you just needed that little loving probably push to be like, okay, I'm not driving you another hour again. Like you're either doing it or you're not. So then obviously you continued on in Irish dance, and I assume you sort of stayed with the competition circuit, as is common in the Irish dance world. Is that true? Like, what did that path look like for you over the next number of years?
Yeah, I did. Once I could actually get on the stage and get through the dancing, I did compete for a number of years. I was also involved very much in athletics once I'd got to sort of senior school. Around 14, 15, 16, I was very much involved in long distance running, between 1,500 meters, cross country. But I quit Irish dancing around 17 or 18. I think at that stage, my mental health really did take a bit of a knock, and I honestly just didn't believe that I was good enough to take my dancing any further at that time.
And so then, because we know from your bio that you ended up dancing professionally with Riverdance and dancing professionally for 12 years. So what was that then allowed you to pursue that professional career? Did you seek out sort of support from a mental health perspective, or was it just taking a step away that made you realize like how much you actually loved it, or what did that look like?
Yeah, a number of things. There was a good bit of mental health support at the time. I think going down that route would probably be another podcast episode, so I'll move on swiftly from there. But around the time, as I said, I was long distance running as well, and I was working with a coach, and he was brilliant. And he inspired me at the time to, when I'd quit dancing, decided I'm just not good enough. He inspired me to go to college and study personal training because, the times when he was coaching me between my dancing and my running, I had started asking him a lot of questions like, why I often felt so sluggish and not very sharp when I danced. Irish dance is really quite sharp, among other things that I was, struggling with technique-wise from turnout. None of it came naturally to me. So he had explained to me many things, but he said, the problem was, and this one really stands out, it was like Irish dance is predominantly anaerobic. It's like a sprint, similar to that of like a 400 meters, I guess, whereas I had been training more like a distance runner doing 5 and 10 Ks all the time. I was using a completely different energy system, which wasn't translating very well to the dancing. And I was always tight and stiff in my ankles, all that kind of stuff. So these conversations, I guess, sparked something in me. And I became really interested then in learning a little bit more about the science of movement. I thought maybe I could actually help some others here. If I'm not going to go down the professional route that I always had dreamed of, maybe I'll do this. But at the same time, I started working in a gym as well when I was going through my personal training, but I missed dance desperately. And again, my dad being the supportive person that he was, he saw that in me. And he encouraged me to get back into the studio and just start practicing. He said, why don't you just practice? It's not only good for your body and you, it's really good for your mental health. You always said after a training session, you felt good about it. So I said, all right. So I did. After a number of weeks, he recorded a video of me dancing and he sent it into Riverdance. So that summer, I was invited to audition. That was summer of 2007. We got to Dublin. And again, here we go again. The moment I told you there's a theme. The moment I saw the cast list, which was full of insanely talented dancers, I just panicked. And I did. I had a full-blown panic attack at the top of Grafton Street at one of the most prestigious theatres in Dublin, the home of Riverdance. And I tried to talk myself out of it again. I was very upset and I was ready to walk away again. But Dad said something I think that stopped me in my tracks. We had a little bit of a walk and he said, I know you've never believed in yourself. He said, you never have done. He said, but I do. And I think it would be a shame to completely miss out on this opportunity because it might not come up again and we are here now. He said, but you do what you want. He said, we can walk away. We'll go home. I'm not going to judge you. I'm not going to say anything more. It's entirely up to you. 20 minutes before the audition, I wiped my tears, my mascara down my face, fixed myself, took a deep breath, and I gave it my best shot. I went in. And a few weeks later, that life-changing email came through. And essentially it changed my life, right? I made it. And I started the rehearsal process then in 2007. I began touring with Riverdance in early 2008. And within 18 months, I had exceeded my wildest dreams when I was offered the lead role. And from there, I went on to tour the world for about 12 years and apparently performing somewhere in the region of 2,500 shows or something. So
wow.
We got there in the end.
Amazing. And like you said, that theme of that like support, but not like forcing you to do anything. It still had to be your decision to some degree, or like that nudge that you needed because he knew that you wanted it or knew that it was your dream, but you just needed a little bit of like external pressure perhaps to sort of get you there. So
yeah, it almost just shows the power, I think, in believing in somebody else. When someone is really struggling to have that belief in themselves, is to have someone that says, I think you can do it. I do believe in you, but in a really soft a way that isn't pushy. There's obviously a line, and we see both, but it was lovely, and he was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's absolutely no surprise to me that you've now like ended up in the work that you're in with like the projects that you have going on for the Irish dance community with your experience within the dance community. Was that something that you really consciously sought out, or that you knew even while you were still dancing professionally that like this is what you were going to do after you retired? Or was it something that kind of just happened a little bit more organically, or what did that transition look like for you?
I think it was organic, and the transition, I think, felt like a natural path, because even during my time on the road, sometimes I trained some of the cast members and used some of the knowledge that I had gained from my personal training qualification, and that further inspired me on the road to take on some more courses. So I was kind of using some of these qualifications while I was away as well, as much as possible. But throughout my competitive, especially, and professional career originally, I wrestled with the same challenges, I think, that dancers do face today. Obviously, how do I manage my nerves? For me, they were often crippling right into my professional career. And that does steal the joy away from experiences that should be unforgettable, right? How do I build resilience? How do I not let difficult competition results or mistakes I make on stage damage my self-esteem and my sense of worth? And how do I keep my body in peak condition? How do I fuel myself properly? The questions are endless, but there were obviously things that I was doing well. And strength and conditioning was a big part of my life. I was highly self-disciplined, and because Irish dance didn't come naturally to me, I knew I had to understand my body better, to feel strong and to use that strength to my advantage. Strength training wasn't just about what it did for my body and my performance. It really was about a sense of empowerment that it gave me too. And it still gives me that to this day, moving well, feeling strong. So what I can say with confidence is that I was always a hard worker, but I wasn't always a smart worker. I pushed myself relentlessly, often without fully understanding the importance of rest and recovery. I think a lot of dancers can probably, understand that one. I trained hard, but I didn't always train efficiently. And I didn't know why I was doing what I was doing all the time, only that I felt like I had to push through. So I think all of this really sparked my passion for this field. And I don't want dancers to go through the same trial and error, the same uncertainty, or the same struggles that I did. I'd love for them to have the knowledge, the tools, the support to train, with more confidence, to manage their mindset, build that mental toughness, and to build a strong, resilient, sustainable career. And that's exactly what I'm here to do, I suppose. And the incredible team that I work with, I think we're all here to do that. And I obviously know that that's exactly what you do.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think such a similar story to so many people working within the dance sort of health and wellness field right now is people having grown up in a culture where maybe it was not as supported for various reasons. We either just did not have the information, or the infrastructure was not there, and what have you. And so like really passionately going into this field to try and make change for this next generation, or the next generations of dancers. Mm-hmm. Can you just talk really briefly before we move on, because I do want to talk about your programs, but sort of what the I don't know if culture is the right word, but like within Riverdance at the time, this was obviously a few years ago. And I'm just curious, like how much, infrastructure is not quite the right word, but support and acceptance of, different things. Like obviously you were seeking that out and you were recognizing the importance of strength and conditioning and even some of the resilience and like all of that. But was that something that was also happening from within the company, or was that sort of entirely you like on your own seeking that out and recognizing that? I know like there's been big shifts in the dance world in general over the last, like, I think even 5 to 10 years. So I'm curious what the kind of landscape or culture was like when you were dancing.
Okay, yeah. We did have on tour with us, we always had a massage therapist, and you'd get a couple of massages a week. And we had a physical therapist on tour with us at all times. But when it came to, your own strength and conditioning and your nutrition, the nutrition part was very, very difficult on tour. Can you imagine being in the back, of nowhere in China? And, sometimes it's like, okay, the street food is the best option. So you looked after yourself in the best way that you could. And there wasn't always catering. There would have been catering if we had to have like a travel show, and have to get to the venue quickly. But for the most part, to be honest, it was there wasn't, say, a strength and conditioning coach on tour with us. So there wasn't the education so much in that field. It was a do-it-yourself kind of thing. So in between tours, you were encouraged, of course, if you had 6 to 8 weeks off, to make sure that you kept yourself in good physical condition.
Yeah, but not necessarily given a plan to be like, this is the plan you're following for the next 8 weeks so that you're show ready when you go back. And yeah, no. Interesting. And that doesn't surprise me because I would, sort of go out on a limb and say that most dance companies, like in that era, that was probably exactly what was happening. Maybe they had, physio and massage, like kind of touring with them, but that's probably the extent of it. I do know, and this is totally an aside, I will get back on track in a second, but I go to the International Association for Dance Medicine and Science conference every year. And I do know a couple of years ago, there was a presentation from part of the healthcare team. And I don't know when they were doing this work, but they were looking at trying to like do a little bit of like load management within the company. And so they'd come up with like a rating system for like how physically hard or how much exertion. It was like a perceived exertion. So they had actually asked the dancers to come up with this like rating scale. And then they would try and cast the shows based on like a total point system. Anyway, it obviously was not a perfect system, but it was interesting because it was like, an attempt at managing training load within a touring company that had very high volumes and like very high workloads. So I just thought that was interesting. And like I said, I don't actually remember like what years they would have been like doing that project, but it was cool.
Yeah, very, very cool. And it's tough. It's 8 shows a week, 2-hour shows, and it's a sprint on and off of the stage, right? So it was physically.
Yeah. So they were trying to say, okay, if the dancers find these dances less physically, strenuous, and then these ones more so, then okay, we're not going to cast them in those. Anyway, it was a whole point system, and it was interesting. So I don't know if they're still using it, but it seemed like it was. I think it was on one of the UK or the Ireland, like it was a UK tour. I think that they did it on. But anyway, totally an aside, but I just find it interesting.
But I think that question, though, was important. I think there probably does still need to be a little bit more help in that. Because if I'm honest with you, especially that many years ago, I was training a lot, to be honest, for aesthetic purposes. Yeah. And not always performance. There were times where I was like, I just want to look good.
Yeah. And I'm sure that was the case with a lot of other dancers as well. And we still see that. And we see that a lot in dance forms, like especially ballet or other dance forms where there is a, sort of emphasis on physique. And so we do still see that where dancers are like, only wanting to do cardio training because they think that's going to be the thing that helps their physique the most, when in reality, when we actually look at, okay, from a entire health and wellness perspective, like maybe we need more of the strength training or what have you. So that is still the case, I think. And we're still trying to break some of those stereotypes within the dance world. So that doesn't surprise me that that was prevalent back then as well.
Absolutely.
I would love to hear some more about the current work that you do with both the Head to Toe Academy and Elevate. Because I think especially the Head to Toe Academy sounds like such a unique platform in terms of like the interdisciplinary work that you're doing and the other professionals that you're working with. Can you just tell me a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. To give it a little bit of a context even as to how that came about, I suppose. I mean, I retired from professional dance 2019. That was my last summer. And shortly after, the world shut down, right? No one was going out on tour. But, that time, I guess, made it even clearer to me that there was a need for a more holistic approach to dancer wellness. And that's when I created the From Head to Toe Academy, a space where dancers could learn not just how to train, but how to take care of their bodies and minds for, first and foremost, joy and longevity in their careers. And of course, I don't have all the answers. I don't know everything. I'm not a mindset person, a nutritionist, or this, that, and the other. Absolutely not. Which is why building a team was very important to me. I wanted to bring together experts across different fields: performance psychology, strength and conditioning, nutrition, mobility. We don't have a physio yet, though. So, but I think all of these things contribute to a dancer's success, both on and off of the stage. And so, the academy is about helping, as you said in the intro, the human being, so the dancer can thrive. And a big part of my personal journey and what I now teach centers around, specifically on the academy, around mobility and mindfulness, which were missing from my own training and throughout my career. During a particularly challenging time in my life, it was just before my last summer with Riverdance. I flew to Bali and I immersed myself in meditation and yoga. It was incredibly uncomfortable, both physically and mentally. I remember sitting cross-legged, my knees were up by my ears, my shoulders were rounding, and I almost felt a little bit embarrassed, to be honest, Erica, to call myself a dancer. And people there, what do you do? I was like, oh, I'm a dancer. And I probably just about had functional range of motion at the time, let alone mobility that you'd expect from a professional dancer and someone that was going to be a yoga teacher. But what fascinated me was how quickly things started to shift. A calmer nervous system, a change of environment, and out of the Western world, right? And all of a sudden, within just a few days, this without moving my body even that much, I had more mobility. I was sleeping better. I didn't feel as much stress. I felt calm for the first time, to be honest, in years and years and years. And that experience completely changed my perspective on movement, on stress management and recovery. And it set me on a path, I think, towards continued learning, which is actually how I found you. But it was also so important that what I created as well with the academy, with all this coming together, was that it was affordable. This was another part of it: subscription-based, affordable. My family struggled to afford all of the resources that I could have had, I guess, growing up. And I know dancers will be in the same position. So that's why I wanted to create something accessible, a program that offers high quality training from experts without an overwhelming financial burden. And then, of course, there's Elevate. That came up very recently. So Elevate Irish Dance Strength and Conditioning it's come from, I train at a wonderful place here in Raleigh, North Carolina, Oaken Iron Fitness, which is run by Matt Gulliver and a team of highly qualified experts in athlete development. And I see their programs, I see the way they work with athletes, and I wanted to collaborate with them on seasonal strength and conditioning programs, because I still love the strength and conditioning side of Irish dance, and I wanted to give them up-to-date, science-backed, structured training at, again, a manageable cost. So we're running a few Elevate cycles per year. The first one just launched a couple of weeks ago. And then the second one will start in April, leading up to another competition. And then the third one will be just 12 weeks out of Oireachtas. So Oireachtas would be regional qualifiers within the Irish dance world. And the goal is, with Elevate as well, is to create an environment where dancers can come together, where whether in person or online, to support and encourage each other, to hold each other accountable, and I guess grow stronger together. I really personally value community and connection, even more so these days. So, I know dancers have unique needs when it comes to strength training, and I absolutely value personal training as well. But we do start each cycle with an initial assessment, and then we'll reassess at the end, making the program feel like it's personalized while still offering the added value of community and support, which, again, I think the world needs a little bit more of. So, everything I do, whether it's through the From Head to Toe Academy or the strength and conditioning side of it, is again, about giving dancers the tools that I wish I'd have had earlier, to not just train harder, but train smarter. Because again, I wasn't very good at that at times, to understand their bodies, their mindset, their recovery, so that they can, I guess, perform at their best and stay in the art form for as long as they want to, and whilst enjoying it all.
Yeah, that's amazing. So is Elevate, you said that is also online as well, or that's just in-person training?
So it's online and in person. So in Raleigh, North Carolina, there's a few dance schools around, and so a few of them come together, and then it's lovely. And then we open up the screen and see some others that can join in as well online. And then some people have signed up that can't make the lives because it conflicts with their schedules. And so we send them on the recording and a PDF with the exercises, and they can take them themselves if they want and go and do it in their own time in their own gym. So yeah, there's lots of different ways that people can join us.
Yeah, that's amazing and so needed, because not every dance studio necessarily has the resources to incorporate that stuff into their schedule and into their training with their dancers. And that doesn't mean that the dancers don't benefit from it and shouldn't be doing that type of training, but we don't necessarily expect that every studio has the knowledge or the skills or, the resources. And some places do. Like, I don't know what it's like in North Carolina, but I know where I am, there are some studios that kind of do it in-house a little bit. They'll bring in like strength and conditioning coaches, or they'll develop programs themselves, but certainly that is not the majority of studios necessarily. And so to have, like you said, like another community that's serving like the entire Irish dance community where dancers can just come together is so cool. And I'm sure they probably all then run into each other at competitions. Like they'll know each other from like online and have that community. And then you have like a little bit of a built-in, which hopefully helps calm nerves and stuff a little bit too. If you're going to, some big like a Oireachtas and you're like, oh, look, there's a friendly face that I recognize from online. So that's really cool.
That's it. I think we're lucky now in that regard that we can all come together online as well. It doesn't matter what dance school you're from. It really doesn't matter. You can all, I think that's beautiful. It's a lovely part of it.
I absolutely agree. Like the resources that dancers have available to them nowadays is just incredible. Like even their ability to work with different teachers. Like if you're in some small town where you don't actually have like an Irish dance studio or any dance studio, like you have the ability to take classes on, like it's so cool compared to, in the past. So That's really neat. I would love to touch just a little bit on your experiences within the Flexibility Foundations program. So that's interesting. I never really know like how people come to find these programs or how they end up sort of like registering in them. But that's really interesting that was sort of like your curiosity in terms of the sort of effect of the nervous system on mobility had already been sparked previously with like sort of your own experiences. So you were, it sounds like, purposely seeking out that type of continuing education.
Yeah, I'm always seeking to learn from people smarter than I.
Me as well.
I consider myself forever a student. I actually usually have a hard time calling myself the teacher and educator. I'm like, do I know enough? Sometimes I question all that. And I love to find people like yourself. And honestly, initially, I found you through Ellen Waller, who you also spoke to, and she is a leading voice and a beautiful person in Irish dance, and so needed. And dancers that get to work with her as well, unbelievably lucky. She's a fantastic human being, and I obviously, if she's doing it, I'm like, well, I'm going to have a little look at that as well. Then if she's saying it was good, and she's who she is, I'm like, well, let's have a little look if it's good enough for her. So, but no, honestly, thank you for that, because I honestly found the course both validating in some senses and also eye-opening. I was happy to see that a lot, or some, I wouldn't say a lot actually, of what I was already teaching in a practical sense aligned with the science behind flexibility. But what really stood out to me was the role of the nervous system, and something I kind of touched on earlier, something that I hadn't fully understood before. And it resonated so deeply, I think, because of my experience in Bali. And for the first time, I had slowed down, right? When I got there, which as dancers, we are terrible at doing. Yeah. And as I said, within days, my mobility improved. And I realized how much tension I had been holding in my body for so long. What I didn't understand really at the time was why that was happening. But the Flexibility Foundations course made perfect sense of it. The nervous system plays a massive role in your flexibility, or mobility, as you like to call it. I prefer to call it as well. If your body feels under threat, whatever, whether it's stress, fatigue, constant overtraining, all of which I was experiencing, a response will be to tighten up as that protective mechanism, and or one of the responses. And I felt that. It wasn't that I suddenly stretched better when I was in Bali. It was that my nervous system finally felt safe enough to allow for some more movements and relaxation. So that realization completely changed how I view flexibility training. And I knew I needed to learn more. I have never worked very well with passive stretching. My body resisted it. And I see the same thing with so many other dancers. And I also see that, as I think you mentioned in the course as well, you see some dancers that effortlessly can drop into the splits. But, in Irish dance and ballet, I'm sure that kind of flexibility just isn't functional. You're never on stage holding your leg up by your head like this, not in Irish dance or, passively sitting in a split hold. You need to generate strength and power in that range of motion that you have, especially we call them front clicks and high kicks, and flexibility alone just isn't enough to find strength in those ranges. Strength is everything. So your course has absolutely influenced how I'm going to approach mobility as well going forward. I'm currently developing a new mobility program, as I had mentioned to you, and I'm absolutely going to run it by you. And I want to incorporate these tools in a more intentional way. So honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, I truly believe whether you're a coach, a dance teacher, or even a dancer that's stretching on your own, I think you need to educate yourself on how flexibility works. I don't believe anyone intentionally wants to harm dancers, but there's lots of outdated stretching methods. So without understanding the science, you can really do a little bit more harm than good sometimes. And you'd mentioned the hypermobile on the course as well, which I think is so important. You see it all the time. Coaches or influencers sharing stretches on Instagram or whatever social platform with little context, no thought about whether they're actually beneficial, but they look good, right? And so, we tend to share those. So listen, Erica, thank you for making the information accessible. I've always struggled with learning in traditional ways, but this course has helped me to connect the dots a little bit more in a way that makes more sense to me. Again, as it's probably obvious throughout my this conversation, I was constantly in a sympathetic state for most of my life, as people will learn about when they take the course. Always pushing, always on. But now I understand that sometimes, or more often than not, the key to better mobility, better performance, and actually feeling good in your body is learning to slow down and work with the nervous system. I'm 38 now, and honestly, I've never been more flexible.
Yeah.
But I didn't have these tools years ago. And so, I'm grateful for you that you researched this and put it out there and teach us. We need it.
Yeah. And I think to your point, that type of mobility is the type of mobility that dancers need, because especially in Irish dance, maybe more so than some other more lyrical styles of dance or even some contemporary and things like that, like it is so much about power and height in your jumps and strength and all of that. And so if you are, not training in ways that then allows your nervous system to access that mobility, it's just counterproductive. Similarly to how you were doing a lot of sort of more long distance and cross country running, and that wasn't necessarily helping your dancing, just because it's a completely different energy system. And it's similar with the stretching stuff, like us sitting in passive splits or things like that isn't going to translate to it improving our dancing. And so I think, like you said, people aren't intentionally trying to do harm to dancers, but I think that a lot of people, their ideas or understanding of how flexibility works is outdated. And so now that we're, learning all this new information, and I'm also like you, like a forever student. And so it's as I understand more and more about the nervous system, I'm like, okay, all the dancers need to know this. This is game changing within the dance world in terms of how we approach mobility and flexibility. And like you said, you're, 38 and the most mobile you've ever been. And we hear that with dancers too. So many of the dancers who use this style of mobility training, they're it just feels so easy. Sometimes it's hard to get buy-in with them because they're used to stretching being painful and their body resisting it and things like that. And so it seems they almost feel like they're not working hard enough, but you get the results with it. So thank you for that. I love hearing about people's like experiences within the course. And I really look forward to seeing like your new mobility program and how that rolls out and how that's being implemented with your dancers within the Irish dance world, because I know Ellen's been implementing it with her dancers. And so, yeah, if the whole Irish dance world can sort of embrace a mobility practice that really honors the nervous system and where it is at, I think we'll see huge improvements in sort of where dancers can get to. So thank you for that. Anytime I have a guest on the podcast, I have 5 kind of rapid fire. They're not super rapid, but like kind of wrap up questions. They're just meant to be fun. You don't need to overthink your answer. But if you're willing, I would love to finish off with those 5 questions. And then I will also get your information, so how people can connect with you. So we'll do that at the end. So if you're game, first of the 5 rapid fire questions is, what is your favorite genre or style of dance? I might already know the answer to this, but
we'll see. Okay, no, I obviously I'm going to say outside of Irish dance, though, I absolutely love, and maybe if I was introduced to it, you never know what path I would have gone down. I love ballroom styles. I love salsa, tango, foxtrot, like the Strictly Come Dancing and the Dancing with the Stars style and all that. Anything with that kind of energy, precision, and that combination of like athleticism and control and musicality. I love it.
Okay, I wasn't going to call that, but I can totally see that. And there's like definitely some parallels between some of those ballroom styles and Irish, just like in, yeah, like you said, precision and athleticism and stuff like that. So, yeah. All right. Question 2, would you rather be on stage or in the studio?
Oh, okay. On stage for sure. This is actually an easy one, because I was, funny enough, would you believe it? I was highly anxious in studio and very, very slow at picking up steps. There's nothing like being on stage and showcasing your work as well. I mean, I don't leave my laptop anymore or leave the gym and get a standing ovation for my work anymore. It doesn't happen.
I'll give you one after the podcast.
Yeah. There's nothing quite like it. And, I actually listened, I know these are quick fire, but I do want to say I listened to your podcast episode with, on neurodivergence and the Pilates.
Oh, with Jennifer Milner, yes.
Brilliant. And I followed her work as well. And that resonated with me as well deeply, because I was that dancer in studio, panic and yeah, she's just lazy or she's just not focused. Oh, I was never
not
those
working
things.
Hard enough, not concentrating. Yeah.
I was never those things,
Yeah.
So no
so
studio.
Then you could shine on stage.
Yeah. Just put me on stage.
Awesome. All right. If you could share the stage with or dance with any dancer, past, present, or, well, I'm not going to say future, but past or present, who would it be and why?
Okay. I honestly, truly believe I've been on stage with the most talented Irish dancers in the world and people that I grew up being very inspired by. So I'm when it comes to Irish, I'll let that go, because I feel like I've been with them. I really have. All the people I was inspired by growing up, I got to dance on stage with them, which was brilliant. But outside of Irish dance, again, I love, do you know Derek Hough and his sister Julianne Hough? They're like ballroom dancers, and they've been on like Dancing with the Stars, and they're beautiful, and they're dancing. Not necessarily. I think it would be quite embarrassing if I went on stage with them, but I wouldn't mind them teaching me.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it was share the stage or just dance with. So you can dance in the studio with them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. What is one thing that you would go back and tell your younger self as a dancer?
I tell that little girl a lot of things, and I think it would be emotional. But the biggest thing I think I'd tell her is, you're so much more than a dancer. For a long time, Erica, I over-identified with being a dancer. It wasn't just something I did. It was like all-encompassing. It was who I was. So when my career shifted, as it does, I found myself asking, who am I? Who am I without this? And like so many dancers and athletes in other sports I've spoken to over the years as well, I'm always interested in their transition. I felt lost. So here's what I've come to understand, that we are all so much more, I think, than the roles we play. So I'd like to say to her, being a dancer is a beautiful, incredible part of you, but it is not all of who you are. Your worth isn't tied to scores or placements, or by how perfectly you execute a step or how beautiful your turnout is. You are defined more by qualities and values like kindness, generosity, empathy, and dedication. And I think these values remain long after our dancing days are behind us. And again, I think my dad was very, very good at reassuring me that I was more than a dancer throughout my life and career, and that my value wasn't tied into the results, but the kind of person that I was. And looking back, I am grateful for that, and it's something I would love other dancers to hear and to also to understand and believe too, right? To really let that soak in, that no matter what happens on stage, and there will be ups and downs. That's how it is, right? Or whatever happens in practice, the mistakes you make, whatever you're going through, you're already pretty okay. You're already good enough. You're all right.
Yeah,
I think that's
a powerful
important
message for young dancers to hear, especially because, I think so many dancers can sort of wrap up their identity in being a dancer, and so really working to know that is a part of them, but it is not all of them. So that's a really powerful message for dancers. All right, one more question. If there was one thing that you could change about the dance world, what would it be?
Just the one. How much longer we got? No,
I know. It's always the one. People are like, "You're finishing on that." I'm like, "Oh, just
Oh dear. Do you know what? Not to turn this around. It's your podcast. You're asking me the questions, but I would honestly be interested to hear what also you think about this. Like my answer, because you might at the end of it be like, I don't agree, and what I'd be very interested to hear. I think the dance world is getting much better at understanding and seeing, the importance of strength training, fueling the body, recovery, nutrition, all that. But I think there's still this outdated mindset that more is always better. More hours in the studio, lots of hours spent in the studio in Irish dance, more pushing through. It's almost like you wear that badge of honor if you did more hours you did. We had a long workshop day of 8 hours in the studio. I'm like, right, okay. But I think if we want longer, or if dancers want longer, healthier careers, I think it starts with better education from the top down, with teachers from the get-go. So, for example, when you take your TCRG, it's the Irish Dance Teacher exam, there is sort of zero, in the book, zero education on the human body, not even the basics of anatomy, of injury prevention, nothing at all really on the dancer's body, and how you respond to injuries either in a studio when you do open a dance school. So there's very little sort of basic knowledge, and I see it all the time in studios now, stretches and drills being given with sort of little to no understanding of how they actually can impact a dancer's body. And this is not a judgment, and I hope no one sees it like this. It's an observation, and I think dance teachers are doing this with good intentions, of course, but often, not always, but often without the education to fully support their dancers in the best way possible. So I'd love to see a little something added to the TCRG maybe exam that covers this, right? And then maybe we wouldn't just see sort of stronger dancers. There'd be less injuries. We'd see dancers that could stay in the sport, the art form, for longer, performing at a higher level and without battling burnout and injury. I know the TCRG exam, and I don't know what it's like in ballet or anything else. I know it's solely on technique, or there's things for, you learn 30 Kayleys, you learn the music, you learn rhythms, you learn timing, but you learn nothing about the human body. And you've got all these bodies that come to your dance school. It baffles me. And so I wish there was just even a little something, because,
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that's the one you picked, because I've been asked this question before, and actually had an interesting conversation over Threads just recently, like within the last 2 weeks, I want to say. And it was a bit of a debate. And so I will say that the Irish dance world is at least slightly ahead of a lot of other forms of dance and other kind of like facets within the dance world, because in the entire rest of the dance world, there is like no actual qualification required to be a dance teacher at all. So at
didn't
least
know that.
you have a bit of an infrastructure to then implement those things. Whereas in, community dance studios where kids are taking ballet and jazz and tap and hip hop and whatever they're taking, and we, refer them just often as like competitive studios or things like that, there very well could be teachers there who have literally never taken any sort of a certification, any sort of a teaching qualification. Their only experience could be that they grew up dancing. And so that's why we have so much of that just like historical tradition that is like perpetuated forwards that's often not based in science. And it's so hard to make change within the dance world. And that's one of the reasons why I do what I do in terms of offering education for dance teachers, because there just isn't necessarily a lot of access to that. And there certainly are, and there are teachers who are very qualified and very educated, and they have gone out and done teacher certifications under different governing bodies, but that is totally voluntary. There's literally nothing that is requiring them to do that. And so for me, when I've been asked that question before, my thing is like, I just want a governing body for dance, similar to sport organizations, like we have governing bodies for them. I would like to see dance have governing bodies, and I would like there to be minimum standards and qualifications for teachers, which then ultimately would incorporate things like working with young people, and not just from a physical perspective too, like knowing child development and knowing psychological development and things like that. Like there's so much that happens, again, not because teachers are inherently trying to be awful, but sometimes the expectations they're placing on kids are just like completely unrealistic for the developmental stage of that child or things like that. And so, I will say at least within the Irish world, and I know there are some other, so like dance sport is a bit more regulated. So like the ballroom dance and stuff, because they compete internationally, it is a bit more regulated. But for most other genres, anybody like can just open a studio down the street. And we see that a lot. We see parents and stuff sometimes opening studios, and they don't have a background in dance. They're just doing it because they have a kid who dances and they think, I'm going to open my own studio. Anyway, so yes, I 100% agree with you. And also, I think you guys are maybe in the Irish world in a slightly more advantageous position to hopefully be able to make some of those changes and actually implement some of that stuff, even if it's just basic anatomy and things like that for the teachers.
Wow. Well, well done, Irish Dance World. Turns out you're a step ahead, and I didn't know it. I had absolutely no idea. You learn something new every day. That is actually... I know,
it's a wild... that fact, so many people, and like parents don't know that when they're signing their kid up to take, ballet at the community studio, they don't know that there's a good chance that the teacher who's teaching that may not have any type of, qualifications, and potentially not even background checks and things like that. Because again, there's no governing body, so there's no requirement. And again, some studios are fabulous and are going to be really high quality and have really educated staff and teachers, and some aren't. So it's really up to parents to do their due diligence, but parents don't know that. They assume it's the same as putting your kid in soccer or, hockey or things like that. But those have governing bodies. So those ones are a little bit more regulated.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Anyway, on that cheery note, how can listeners learn more about you or get in contact with you? I know you have like the Head to Toe Academy and then also have Elevate. Is there website, social media, emails? What are the best ways for people to reach out?
Yeah, so the website is from headtotoeacademy.com. You can email me at info at from headtotoeacademy.com, and you can find us on Instagram from Head to Toe Academy.
Perfect. And I will link all of that in the show notes. So if anybody wants to go and click on that, I will put all of those in the show notes so people can have access to those very easily in there. And for anybody who was interested in the Flexibility Foundations program that we were just chatting about, the next round of it is opening soon. Well, registration's already open by the time you listen to this podcast episode. The next round is starting on February 19th. So if you're interested, I will also put the link to that in the show notes. And if you are listening after that round has started, there will be another one later this year. So you can always put your name on the interest list and get all of the information about that program. I am going to wrap things up there. I really appreciate you taking so much time to chat with me this evening, Chloey. It is always so fun to connect with people who just meet through this amazing dance community and dance world. So I really appreciate you taking time to be on the podcast. And I really appreciate everybody for listening as well. I hope you all have a great rest of your day.